What's up, y'all? I'm Tim Leak, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about real estate investing, entrepreneurship, and finance. And in this video, we're going to talk about purchasing cheap houses to rent through the Section 8 program and if it's worth it or not. Some investors are dead set against it, and some investors are all for it. Now, it's really no right or wrong answer. It just really all depends on the investor and their overall objective. Well, hopefully this video will help you decide which approach is right for you. And stick around to the end because we're going to also go over a deal that I have on the table right now. It's for a cheap house, and we're going to go over some things and we're going to see if the deal makes sense or not. All right, so let's get to it. Now, like I just said, when it comes to investing in Section 8 properties, some investors love to invest in cheap properties that they know that they can get a certain amount of cash flow from, whereas some investors are not so much worried about the cash flow, but more so about how much the property can appreciate over the years. Now, for some reason, a lot of investors think that you either have to have one or the other, cash flow or appreciation, and that you can't have both. And what I've come to realize is a lot of new investors like myself tend to care more about cash flow, and a lot of veteran investors who already have multiple properties tend to care more about appreciation. Now, what I try to teach is how to find properties that do both, generate cash flow and appreciate. It may not be easy, but it can be done. If you haven't already, check out the video I did on how to find the perfect Section 8 investment property. Now, finding one of these properties takes a lot of patience. They don't just fall out of the sky. But when you do find one, it's a gold mine. But nevertheless, investing in cheap rental properties for Section 8 definitely has its pros and its cons. So let's get into the pros. Now, one of the biggest pros of investing in cheap properties is just what it is. It's cheap. The barrier of entry is almost non-existent. It's so much easier to get started because of these low prices. If you find an $80,000 house, 20% down on that is only $16,000. This is something that a lot of people can afford. And anyone who is trying to get into rental property investing in cheap houses is one of the easiest ways because of the low prices. And you'd be surprised, a lot of these properties, depending on which area of the country they're in, won't need a ton of work done to them to be rent ready. See, it's a big difference from renovating a property to sell and renovating a property to rent out. If you're selling a property, you're gonna spend more money for renovations. Buyers are more picky and pay a lot more attention to details and specifics. However, renters are a lot more easygoing and don't really trip off small imperfections. And besides, you can do a very minimal renovation and still have the place looking great. Now, another pro to investing in cheaper houses is, on average, the cash flow can be higher, especially with rent prices rising so rapidly. Given the example I just gave, if you put $16,000 down on an $80,000 house, your mortgage will probably be around $500. Now, you may be able to charge somewhere between $1,200 to $1,500 for rent, depending on the number of bedrooms. So you'll be making somewhere between $700 to $1,000 per month of cash flow, which is really, really good. Now, if you invest in a house that costs more, yes, you can get more money for rent, but your mortgage is also going to be more. So your cash flow may be a lot less. Yeah, you may get $3,000 a month in rent, but if your mortgage is $2,800, then that's only $200 a month in cash flow you're getting, which is a big difference from $700 to $1,000. And that's why, even though I always encourage investors to buy properties in good neighborhoods because that's where the housing authority will pay the most, however, I also tell them which houses to target in these neighborhoods that'll make the best Section 8 rentals. Houses that are older, smaller, possibly fixer-uppers, and priced well below what these bigger and newer houses are priced at in these same areas. This way, you get the benefit of being in a good neighborhood and you get the higher monthly rent payments from the housing authority, but you were also able to buy in at a lower price. But if you buy in at top dollar, that's going to crush your monthly cash flow. But anyway, if you're going to invest in cheap houses, 9 times out of 10, the mortgage will be so low that you'll have a good amount of cash flow coming in. Some investors may prefer this, some don't. It just depends on the investor. Now, another pro of investing in cheaper houses is you're able to buy multiple properties at a faster rate. So let's just say you have $100,000 to invest. Now, the average home price in the US is $348,000. So if you put down 20% on an average house, that's almost $70,000. And after closing costs and maybe some money for some light renovations, your $100,000 is all but gone. Now, if you were to purchase that same $80,000 house we talked about earlier, put $16,000 down, pay another $4,000 for closing costs, and say another $5,000 for light renovations, you're only out of pocket for $25,000. So technically, you would be able to purchase 4 properties with that same $100,000, as opposed to just one property. And most likely, those 4 properties together will cash flow more than that one property. So your cash on cash return on that $100,000 investment will be higher if we're just strictly talking about cash flow. So you're able to scale your business and add to your portfolio at a much faster rate if you decide to buy these cheap houses. And because of this, it brings us to our next pro, which is it's a quicker way to financial freedom. So if your overall goal is to increase your monthly cash flow and become financially free as soon as possible, then buying cheap real estate may be the way to go, because we all know that cash flow creates financial freedom. And since the properties are cheap, you're able to buy more and more properties in a short amount of time. Your monthly income will cover all of your monthly living expenses, at which point you are financially free and able to retire. You no longer have to trade your time for money because your rental income just keeps coming in whether you're working or not. It's definitely a wonderful situation to be in, and it's usually the overall goal of most investors. And all of these pros do sound good, but understand it does come with some cons. Oh yes, you do have some trade-offs and some sacrifices if you do invest in these cheap properties. So with that being said, let's go over the cons. Now, one of the biggest cons of investing in cheap properties is these properties appreciate at a very, very slow rate. And that's probably the biggest trade-off when it comes to investing in these types of properties. You are trading long-term appreciation for instant cash flow. Now, like I always say, cash flow is great because it buys you time, but appreciation is what really builds wealth. I've literally seen properties in Northwest DC appreciate $1 million in 15 years. Now, granted, these properties are very expensive to buy in the first place, but some investors prefer to invest in these expensive areas where the cash flow is extremely low, if any at all, and wait 10 to 15 years and then sell for a huge profit. There's just so many different strategies investors can use when investing in real estate. And as an investor, our main goal is to make money. And the amount of money that you can make from appreciation is usually a lot more than what you can make from cash flow. And realistically, the cash flow usually gets spent, whether it's on bills or day-to-day expenses. It's a lot easier to spend money that's paid directly to you month after month. But equity in a house is like a savings account that you can't constantly pull from. You can't just go withdraw money from your house every month. So in all honesty, it's forcing you to save. And when you have enough equity, you can either sell or just pull some of that equity out and go buy another property. That's the benefit of appreciation. Now, another con to investing in these cheap properties is usually cheap properties aren't in good neighborhoods. Now, this is not always the case, but most of the time, these properties are in areas with high crime, high poverty, a high presence of drugs, bad schools. I mean, these areas are typical areas that I wouldn't want to invest in. I mean, it's just my personal opinion, but I don't want to have to worry about my place constantly getting broken into, my tenants getting robbed. It just seemed like it would be more of a headache dealing with a property that's located in a bad area. And the truth of the matter is, another con, these areas usually don't attract high quality tenants. High quality tenants aren't going to want to live in low quality neighborhoods. And that even goes for Section 8 tenants. High quality Section 8 tenants want to live in good neighborhoods as well. So even though Section 8 housing is limited because there are so much more voucher holders than there are Section 8 landlords, so tenants might settle in a not so good neighborhood for the time being, but they are constantly going to be looking for another place in a better neighborhood. And the last thing you want as a landlord is tenants constantly moving in and out of your place. It kills your return. So if you invest in these areas, usually you're going to attract people who either are going to be moving in and out or people who don't mind living in these areas. And usually, not 100% of the time, but usually they aren't the best tenants. So now that we've gone over the pros and the cons of investing in cheap rental properties, now we're gonna go over a real live deal that I have on the table right now, and you guys can let me know what you think in the comment section. So the deal was from a wholesaler I deal with, and if you don't know what a wholesaler is, they will find an off-market property, sign a contract with the seller for a certain amount of money, and then assign the contract to an investor, usually for about $10,000 to $20,000 more than what they're supposed to buy it from the seller. So they'd be making $10,000 to $20,000 just by assigning me the deal. So they've been sending me this property for about 3 weeks now, and it's a 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath row house located in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's for $95,000. Now when you look at the pictures, you can see that the house is actually in pretty decent condition and only would require about $5,000 to $10,000 of work to get it ready to rent. And according to my wholesaler, I can get anywhere from $1,500 to $1,600 a month for rent, but that's just considering the private rental market. According to HUD's 2023 fair market rent postings for Section 8, a 4-bedroom in Baltimore City is listed at $2,298 a month, which is pretty good. I've been telling y'all that these rent prices have been shooting up lately. So on paper, a 4-bedroom house for $95,000 that requires minimal renovations and can possibly get you over $2,000 a month in rent payments looks like a hell of a deal. But you can't just go off of what it looks like on paper when you're dealing with purchasing real estate. You gotta dig a little deeper. So instead of driving out to the property, because the house is over an hour from me, I looked the house up on Google Maps and checked the 360 street view just to get a better idea of the neighborhood. So there's the house right there on the corner. The outside actually looks pretty good. And as you can see, right next to it is a house with boards on the windows. So it's right next to a vacant house that's boarded up. And as I turn the camera, you can see some people outside. The house is right next to an alleyway, and there's some bags of trash just in the alleyway. So yeah. And yeah, you got some guys that's hanging out right there. They're pretty much right in front of the house. So let's go down the street a little bit more. You can see right here on the corner is another house with busted out windows. So that's another vacant. We got some people just kind of standing around, hanging out. I mean, it looks like it's the middle of the day and there's a lot of people just hanging outside. And these aren't kids, these are grown people who are just chilling and not at work. So the neighborhood already is turning me off. So now it's time to look up the crime rate in the zip code. The US average for violent crime is 22.7. And this area is at an 87.3. And the US average for property crime is 35.4. And here it's an 82.7. So as you can see, the area really isn't gonna be a desirable area for a high quality tenant. And like I always say, tenants are the backbone of your business. And even though $2,000 a month in cash flow does sound good, I want my investments to be long-term, as close to passive as possible, less headache, less stress investments. And those really aren't the type of vibes I'm getting from this property. So obviously it's a hard no for me, but let me know what you guys think. But with that being said, there are properties all throughout the country that are cheap in areas that may not be as bad as this one. There are some investors who have tons of cheap properties in okay areas and only focus on cash flow, and it works for them. So like I said, it's no right or wrong way. There's some pros and cons and some trade-offs, but it all depends on what you want as an investor. So in closing, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful, and like always, I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.